who needs no introduction. You will be aware of his astonishing success recently in 12 Years a Slave, and we'll speak in a moment about your most recent project. But I wonder how much your life has changed since that film, because you were already a very big star. You were already, you got an OBE, am I right?
That's true,
So
yeah.
you've been honoured both within and without the industry. But does a role like that and a success like that push you into a new league, into a new public perception, or not?
Yeah, I think it does to a degree. Certainly with the with the Academy Awards and the sort of lead up to that, which was just sort of a blitz of media and really a kind of very joyous experience with a film that I think all of us involved in were so proud of. But yes, I mean, it was definitely a more sort of concentrated time for me in terms of that.
I presume you've got a stock answer to my next question, which is how does it feel not to win an Oscar?
I actually don't have a stock answer to that. I don't think I've been asked that. How does it feel? I mean, I think because the truth is, because the film won, it felt like a real celebration anyway. So I was able to be incredibly joyous about being there and being amongst a group of actors that I really admire, and then to have a film that it was received in the way it was. So it didn't feel like a loss exactly.
Glad to hear it. You could have been forgiven, of course, after such a harrowing performance in such a deeply emotional film for looking for some projects that offered light relief next. I don't think anyone would describe the Nigerian Biafran War in the late 1960s in that context, but that is the focus of your next film, Half of a Yellow Sun. And I know when you're a big star, the chronology of films reaching the public isn't necessarily the same as the chronology of you making them, but you haven't gone for a more relaxing role, have you?
Sure, that's true. I mean, in fact, I shot Half of a Yellow Sun just before 12 Years a Slave. I left Calabar in Nigeria to go over to New Orleans, to Louisiana, to start shooting. But yeah, they're both projects that I was just deeply passionate about, and in a kind of wonderful year of working on projects that I loved. This was one of the projects that I did, and and the story of these very, I think, beautiful, intricate personal relationships that are occurring during the time of the Biafran War in Nigeria between 1967 and 1970.
It is stories about relationships, the film, as much as it is about the war itself, or even more than it's about the war itself.
Yeah, it sort of starts. It's interesting. It starts in 1960, just around the time of independence, and it becomes initially a story of these personal relationships. And what I really loved about it was that when the war arrives, and the Civil War arrived in '67, it doesn't. The relationships don't stop developing. It's not as if the war completely, takes over. People are still learning about each other, and their relationships are still developing and growing, even as the circumstances become more harrowing and tragic.
So nuanced and politically important and deep, for want of a slightly better word. How do you pick scripts? I mean, again, possibly it's a similar answer to my first question about how much the world changes after you do a film like 12 Years a Slave, but you pick and choose, presumably to a degree that is denied less successful actors.
That's possible, yeah. This was a very straightforward choice in a way. I mean, I had spoken to B. Bandele, who adapted the book and directed the film. For several years, I've known him for a long, long time, and we talked a lot about trying to make a film in Nigeria and shooting a film in Nigeria. We wanted to do that very much, and Chimamanda Adichie's book, Half of a Yellow Sun, which my mother introduced me to not long after it came out in around '06 or '07, was this. I just thought was a beautiful book, and when B told me he was adapting it, it just was the perfect kind of confluence of events and an incredible opportunity to make a film of this scale in Nigeria, really show the beauty of the country as well as this fascinating history.
Is it a safe place to make a film at the moment?
Yeah. I mean, it's Nigeria, especially in the north, with the Boko Haram, has there's certain acts of violence there to do with people trying to establish Sharia law, but we were in the southeast, which is a very different part of the country, an incredibly safe place, obviously, to make the film, a very generous place. I mean, in terms of the security of the country, I mean, very safe. You know, the real struggles that we had when we were making the film is that we were in very remote areas, and so a lot of the crew who were foreign to Nigeria, a lot of the cast and crew, you know, who'd come in from Britain, South Africa, and so on, you know, started getting sick. You know, so the real struggle was the what was called in the end the Creek Cleanse, which you know, if you wanted to lose a few pounds, it was the typhoid malaria mix.
Did you get it?
I didn't actually. I managed to dance between the raindrops a little bit and get out in one piece. But everybody was okay. But you know, there was definitely some thinner people around.
What's next on the agenda? What else have you got coming up?
Well, I just shot a film called Z for Zachariah, based on the book.
Robert O'Brien book?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
I didn't know they were filming that.
Yeah, we did that in New Zealand. So
who are you playing?
Loomis,
the guy in the suit that appears at the top of the valley.
The guy in the suit.
Mate, I'm so excited that you made this. That was one of my favourite books when I was about 10. I had no idea that was that. Well, you better explain to everybody else what the film is about.
Yeah, please go for it. Yeah.
It is essentially a post-apocalyptic world in which a small child, it's a little girl, I think, isn't it?
Yeah.
And her family are possibly the only survivors of a nuclear war until this character in a spacesuit appears on the horizon, and that is you.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's an adaptation of the book, I'd say.
Of course, so it won't be slavishly.
Yeah, well, yeah, and so it's a three-hander in this case, and the book was more of a two-hander.
Yes.
And so and with myself, Chris Pine, and Margot Robbie, and so we just concluded that, which was really exciting and a beautiful place to shoot, you know, New Zealand, as everybody knows, and so very excited about that coming out.
Oh, yeah, I bet you were. Not as excited as me, it would seem.
No, I was at your level, but a few months ago.
When you first got the script, I should keep up with showbiz news, shouldn't I? I didn't know that was under in production. When will that hit the cinemas? Do you know?
I'm not sure. It'll be probably
early.
Yeah, it's a bit early.
And how do you do that when you come into a studio like this one? Not specifically this one, although actually I should have mentioned earlier, people can see you in the studio at lbc.co.uk. The webcams are on. How do you muster up enthusiasm for a project that is probably the second or third last one that you did? You have to almost get back into not the character, obviously, but back into the zone you were in when you were making a film that could, in some cases, have been 18 months or 2 years ago. I mean, if you come back to talk about Z for Zachariah, it will be long distant from now, won't it?
That's true, yeah. I suppose it just depends on project to project. You know, with Half of a Yellow Sun, we were it was something that was so dear to me, and such an, you know, the Biafran War was such an incredible part of my childhood in a way. I remember just being fascinated by it and talking to my mother about it and her experiences as she was a teenager when it happened, and my grandfather, her father, you know, it was an incredibly difficult time, you know, as the Nigerian forces basically strangled the life out of Biafra. So, in a way, talking about something like that, even after a period of time, is straightforward and passionate for me.
I just interrupt you there to say that we're just hearing that Sajid Javid, the MP for Bromsgrove, is to become the new Culture Secretary. David Cameron has just announced, thereby defying just about every pundit on the planet who was absolutely certain it would be a woman. There'll be more on that story in the news coming up at 11 o'clock today. You mentioned Half of a Yellow Sun was brought to your attention by your mum. Was that, for reasons you've just explained, was that before you became an actor? Were you still a lad? Was that pre-Lambda?
No. This was, you know, I suppose we'd spoken about the Biafran War itself,
of course,
before then. But no. This was just after.
Because the book's quite recent, 2007.
Yeah.
So how does she feel when you ring home? Presumably, immense pride in your career so far, but when you ring home or when you call her up to tell her about a project like this that speaks to your personal and professional life on such a grand scale, how does Mum react to that sort of news?
She was incredibly excited, you know. I mean, very similar to how you reacted to for Zachariah. You know, it was a beautiful book by Chimamanda Adichie, and you know, my mum was just thrilled that it was happening, and that that I was going to be able to make the film in Nigeria, not far from Enugu, which is where so much of my family is from, and where a lot of my family still is, and so it was a very exciting time, for us.
It occurs to me that those two big roles of recent years, Half of a Yellow Sun and 12 Years a Slave, only a black man could play those parts, and there's a lot of talk, of course, about the lack of opportunity that Britain offers to actors of colour as opposed to perhaps Hollywood. Is that a problem that you recognise, or does your recent success suggest that maybe the problem isn't as big as some people have contended?
Well, I mean, I suppose that there are differences in terms of what happens with an individual, what happens in general, and so I think I think there's still there's a long way to go before there's a real total sense of equality with all of these issues. Like, of course, but in my experience, I've been profoundly privileged and lucky with the work that I've been able to do, and I of course hope to continue that, and we'll see. I just one wants a kind of parity with everybody. Obviously, that's incredibly difficult to achieve that totally, but we'll see. I think we're pushing in the right direction for that. And the part in Z for Zachariah could have gone to anyone, couldn't it?
Exactly, yeah. Absolutely anyone. Yep. I hope you'll come back and talk to us about it when I feel I should apologise for getting more enthusiastic about the film you've done next than I was initially about the film that you were here to talk about. But I can't disguise my excitement at one of my favourite childhood books being turned into a movie. It's just one of those things. Chiwetel Ejiofor, thank you so much for coming in. Best of luck with Half of a Yellow Sun, which is hitting cinemas very soon. The time has just gone 11 o'clock. We have a new culture secretary, appropriately enough, given that we are discussing culture, but we will continue to discuss the fate of the last one. Are we dancing on Maria Miller's political grave now, or is there a more serious issue at stake, namely the very reputation of the political class?
On FM, online, on your mobile, and on digital radio. Leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.